Good morning, everybody. It's really good to be here. I lived in Busan, Korea for 7 years. 부산에서 7년 살았어요. I know that line because whenever, it's not, 아부하지 마세요. I spent some time learning Korean when I was there. 7 years, I should know more. And it was challenging, but I had a lot of fun learning Korean. I remember one time getting Go Youngie and Jo Younghee confused. And I taught at Dongju Daehak in Busan. One time I was teaching a class and I wanted to tell them to quiet down. So I wanted to say, Jo Younghee 해주세요. But I got confused. Go Younghee 주세요. Nobody was quieting down. So I had to tell them again, Go Younghee 주세요. Still, Go Younghee 주세요. Finally, one of my students said, no, Jo Younghee. Then I thought, oh man, they're probably thinking, 미친 외국인. Who hired this guy? Where did he come? Why does he want a cat? Where are we going to get a cat anyway? So anyway, that was a fun moment in Korea. And when I go back to Canada, sometimes I tell people I lived in Busan. They're like, Seoul? No, Busan. Nobody really knows Busan. Everybody knows Seoul. But now, you guys saw that interview with the guy on the BBC whose kid came in, he lives in Busan. So now, anytime people say, oh, I don't know Busan, remember that guy with the kids? And like, oh yeah, right, you're from Busan. I'm so proud of that guy. He put us on the map. That's amazing. Yeah, last week I heard you had Dr. Barry Corey here, so that's exciting. He was the president of the university. I studied at Talbot Seminary, which is part of Biola University. So I was very excited to be following in his footsteps. Just 1 week later, I get to speak after him, so that's great. All right, I want to talk to you about some very serious things this morning. Some people would say this is just for adults, not for high school students. But I think you guys can handle this. I just want you to pay close attention, and I want you to think carefully about what I'm saying. As long as the people of Japan have lived on their islands, and especially as long as they've lived in the Tokyo area, Mount Fuji has soared over it. Mount Fuji is a beautiful, majestic mountain. And at the base of Mount Fuji, there's a park called Aokigahara. It's also a beautiful park. But it has the sad distinction of being one of the suicide capitals of the world. In other parts of the world, when people want to take their lives, they go to bridges, they go to cliffs, they go to waterfalls, high places where they can jump to their deaths. But not in Japan. In Japan, when people want to die, they go to a park. And there's a sign at the entrance of this park, and it says, think of your families, trying to discourage people from dying, from taking their lives. But nevertheless, every year, between 30 and 100 bodies are discovered in this park. And they say that for every person that died, there were many more who tried to take their lives and failed. Japan has one of the highest suicide rates in the world, but it's certainly not alone. The World Health Organization says in the past half century or so, the rate of suicide in the world has increased by 60%. That means that now about 1 million people a year take their lives. And that works out to about 3,000 people a day. Think about that for a moment. Think about the fact that somewhere in the world today, could be here in Korea, could be here in Seoul, could be anywhere in the world, about 3,000 people are going to die. Imagine if all of them were here in this school or walking around outside. Imagine if you could walk up to them and talk to them, find out their story, hear why they wanted to die, and know that today would be their last day on earth. Ravi Zacharias is a Christian evangelist and apologist, and he was once speaking in a city in Western Canada. And there was a woman in the audience. She was also from India, like him. She was taking copious notes while he was speaking. And at the end of it all, she came up to talk to him. She wanted to tell him her story. So she told him about how her husband was a famous doctor in that city, took care of a lot of patients. And one day, he came home from work late. He went into the kitchen and she woke up. She was asleep in bed. She woke up. But this was his normal routine to go into the kitchen. So she went back to sleep. But suddenly there was a loud bang, a loud sound. And she woke up quickly and knew something was wrong. She went to the kitchen and saw him seated in a chair, slumped over a table. When she got up to him, she realized he was gone. There was a note on the table, and that note said basically something like, "Some people leave this world as a result of natural causes, but other people choose when they leave this world." And he said, "That is my choice. I choose when I leave this world." And then she poured out to Ravi Zacharias all her pain and frustration, how she had to take care of these children he left behind. She had to put all his affairs in order and everything. And she looked at him and said, "Why? Why did this happen?" He looked back and he said, "Look, lady, I don't know. I just met you. I don't know your husband. I don't know your story." But he said, "This one thing I will tell you. For some people, despair is not a moment in time. For some people, despair is a way of life." Tell me something. That man who died, the 3,000 people who are going to die today, does it matter? Does it matter whether anyone persuades them not to kill themselves? Does it matter whether they live or whether they die? Oh, sure, I know you can tell me that, yes, of course it matters. It matters to their friends, to their family members, to their spouses, to their children. They're going to miss them. They're going to be upset. It matters to them. And yes, I know all of that. And I agree, it does matter to them. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I want to know is from the grand scheme of things, from the big picture, does it really matter? You know, sometimes you can see little children playing, and they spend a whole lot of work making this beautiful artwork, or they build something out of Lego. It's a masterpiece. They're so proud of them. It took them 20 minutes to build, and it's amazing. And then their younger brother, sister comes along, and in about 3 seconds, they destroy the whole thing. And then they're so upset, they're distraught, they can't go on, nothing matters anymore, they're crying, they're throwing a temper tantrum. And then about 5 minutes later, they're playing with another toy, and they don't care, right? In that moment, for that child, when they're so upset, it matters so much. But we can see from the big picture, it doesn't really matter. And that's what I'm talking about. All those people who are going to die today, from the big picture, from the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Scientists say that our closest star, the sun, is in a sequence, in a phase of time known as the main sequence, in which it's converting hydrogen into helium through the process of nuclear fusion. And over the next few billion years, it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. 4 billion years from now, it's going to be so hot that it will just melt the whole earth. And any life that's on earth will die. 5 billion years from now, the main sequence will end. And it will start a new phase when it becomes a red giant. As a red giant, it's going to get it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. 7 billion years from now, it will be so big that it will consume the whole earth. And any life that happened to be alive on it still will definitely be gone by then. When that happens, the whole human race will be extinct. That means that everything that you ever cared for, everybody you ever loved, every accomplishment you ever achieved, all of that will be gone. Not just for you, but for everybody you know. All of your loved ones, all of your friends, everything they did, everything they cared about, everybody they knew, everything they were passionate about, all of that will be finished. And not just for all of them, but for all the kings that ever marched with their armies, all the victories they ever won, all the soldiers that ever sacrificed their lives for their compatriots, all the presidents and prime ministers, all the decisions they made for all of the nations, all of that will be finished. The whole human race will be as if it never even existed. And there will be nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. So tell me, if that's how it all ends, does anything really matter now? Now, I know some of you tell me, you say, look, you got it all wrong. When this earth starts heating up billions of years in the future, we're not going to sit around and melt. We're not going to sit around and die. We're going to get in our spaceships. We're going to blast off. We're going to explore other planets. We're going to have intergalactic federations. The planetary, the Rebel Alliance is going to form. Jedi Knights will be roaming around. The USS Enterprise will be boldly going where no one has gone before. We're not going to sit around and die. We're going to make colonies on other planets. You know, if you said that, I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. If technology has come this far in just a few hundred years, where are we going to be in billion years? Certainly we're going to be able to explore and settle on other planets. The problem is, that's not the end of the story. Our universe doesn't end there with the end of the earth. Scientists say 100 trillion years from now, the stelliferous era will end. That means new stars will stop forming. Any stars that still do exist will all become degenerate stars, compact stars. That is white dwarfs or neutron stars or black holes. And eventually, even these white dwarfs and neutron stars will all decay. And all you'll be left with is black holes. With no light, no heat anywhere in the universe, there can be no life anywhere. And then even these black holes, supermassive black holes, thanks to Hawking radiation, all of them will eventually evaporate. And then the entire universe will consist of nothing but tiny subatomic particles separated by distances that are bigger than the mind can even conceive of. The universe will reach heat death, maximum entropy. And then all of those intergalactic federations, all of that planetary exploration, all of those colonies, all of that will be finished. It will be as if the entire human race never even existed. And there will be nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Steven Weinberg, who won a Nobel Prize for physics, once said, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless." Back in the 17th century, a great French thinker named Blaise Pascal said the following. He said, "I see the terrifying immensity of the universe which surrounds me, and find myself limited to one corner of this vast expanse, without knowing why I am set down here rather than elsewhere, nor why the brief period appointed for my life is assigned to me at this moment rather than another, in all the eternity that has gone before and will come after me. On all sides I behold nothing but infinity, in which I am a mere atom, a mere passing shadow that returns no more. All I know is that I must soon die. But what I understand least of all is this very death, which I cannot escape. So tell me something. If your life, if my life is just a passing shadow, if the whole human race is just a mere atom that will soon be annihilated, does anything really matter? Oh, sure, you can decide it matters in your mind. You can say, well, it matters to me. I care about it. Sure, you can do that. But isn't that just a fantasy land you're choosing to live in? How is that different from saying, it really matters whether I put the milk and cookies out for Santa Claus on Christmas Eve? It really matters because I decide it matters. Sure, you can decide it matters, but you're just living in a fantasy land. And if that makes you feel good, you can do it. But the objective reality is that nothing really matters. During World War II, the SS, also known as the Schutzstaffel, they created these extermination camps or concentration camps where they would seek to liquidate all the people that they considered inferior. Jews, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, Slavic people. They would take them there on trains and they would put them into gas chambers where thousands of people could be killed at one time. But there's something the SS, the Schutzstaffel, didn't want to do. They didn't want to do the dirty work of getting the corpses out of these gas chambers and taking them to the crematoria where the bodies would be burned. So when they got a trainload of victims to come in, they would choose some able-bodied young men and put them into a unit known as the Sonderkommandos. It was the responsibility of these commandos to dispose of the dead bodies. Sometimes when they were clearing out the bodies, they would suddenly look into the face of someone they knew, a loved one, somebody they cared about who had just been killed. At times when a trainload of maybe 500 people or less, just a smaller group of victims came in, the SS couldn't be bothered to get the gas chambers going, the crematoria going. So instead what they would do is dig a large pit. And it would be the responsibility of these commandos to drag their victims over to the pit where an SS officer would take his gun and put a bullet in the back of the neck of this victim. And then the body would be thrown on a blazing fire of burning corpses. Sometimes the bullet wouldn't even work, and the person would be thrown on there alive. It was a brutal, horrible, despicable work they had to do. And you might think, these commandos, how could they do this? This was so evil, so vile. You see, they didn't have a choice. If they didn't do this, they themselves would be killed. And in fact, every few months, the Nazis decided they knew too much and the entire unit would be liquidated. The first job of every new Sonderkommando unit was to dispose of the bodies of the previous unit. Of the 14 generations of Sonderkommandos who lived and died at Auschwitz, the most infamous of all concentration camps, of those 14 generations, one generation managed to get some writing equipment, and they recorded what was happening there. They buried it in the ground, and after the war was finished, people found these records. These commandos, these Sonderkommandos, did it because they were persuaded the world needed to know what was happening there, that it really mattered whether people found out of this great evil. Tell me something. Were they fools? Did they think it mattered so much, but it really didn't matter at all? Were they just living in a fantasy land because that's how they needed to cope? Many of you know the story of the Lord of the Rings, made into a movie a few years back. It's an epic tale. The ring of great power. One ring to rule them all. The story of Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee and the wizard Gandalf and the Fellowship of the Ring, how they have to go to Mordor and destroy this ring in the fires of Mount Doom. There's a scene at the end of the second book or the second movie where Frodo holds up the ring and almost gives it away to the forces of darkness. And only at the last minute does Sam rush in and tackle him and save the day. And then Frodo is lying there. He's in despair. And he can't go on. And he looks to Sam for some hope. He asks him, why are they doing what they're doing? Why should they go on? And Sam tells him why. And the last thing he says, the reason they have to go on is because there's some good in this world. And it's worth fighting for. Tell me something. Is that true? Is there really some good in this world? Is there really some evil? Or is that all in the movies? Is that just in our fantasy land? Is that all just in our imagination? Richard Dawkins is probably one of the most famous or perhaps infamous atheists in the world. He's an emeritus professor at Oxford University. And he once said the following. He said, in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties that we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Now, some people will say, look, stop thinking about all this. This is just depressing. Who cares what's going to happen 100 trillion years from now? Who cares? We're alive now. Enjoy life now. Take life by the horns and live it to the full. A number of years ago, there was a movie called The Dead Poets Society, and in there, the character played by Robin Williams gave the world this expression. He said, "Carpe diem, seize the day." Now I understand people don't say that anymore. In Indonesia, they told me they say YOLO. You only live once. Do you say that in Korea too? YOLO? Anyone? Maybe not. A lot of people will say that. You only live once. Just enjoy life. Yes, many people can do that. They can just push out of their mind these big questions and just focus on enjoying today. But for many other people, purpose and meaning haunt their lives. And there is nothing so frustrating, so lonely, so difficult as climbing the greatest mountain, overcoming the highest peak, surpassing the biggest obstacle. And after you do all of that, you discover there is nothing there. It's empty, meaningless. When I was speaking in Jakarta a few weeks ago, one of the teachers who was at one of the schools there came up to me afterwards. She had graduated from one of the top universities in Indonesia, and she said, when she graduated from Teachers College there, that's exactly how she felt. She graduated at the top of her class. She'd achieved what she longed to do. She felt nothing. In 1995, Andre Agassi beat Pete Sampras to become the #1 tennis player on earth. And shortly after he found out about that, a reporter called him and said, "How do you feel? What do you think?" And he said, "Yeah, this is great. I'm so happy. It's what I always wanted." But then he writes in his autobiography, he says, "That was a lie. The truth is I felt nothing at all." He says after he talked to that reporter, he went out of the streets and walked around drinking strong black coffee and thinking, what the hell is wrong with me? And then in his book, he drops his bombshell and he says, I did it. I'm the number one tennis player on earth, and yet I feel empty, unsatisfied. If being number one feels like this, meaningless, what's the point? The words of Andre Agassi are echoed by the author of the book of Ecclesiastes. Written by a wise teacher, it says, probably King Solomon. And thousands of years ago, King Solomon experienced everything this life had to offer. He built palaces, he planted vineyards, he had flocks of animals, all kinds of herds of everything you can think of. He had wealth beyond measure, piles of gold and silver. He had a harem of women. He had everything that he could enjoy. He said all of it was meaningless, vanity, just a chasing after the wind. Nothing is new under the sun. All of us, no matter where we are in life, at some moment in time, think, what's the point? What are we here for? And you can push that out of your mind, but the questions still remain. Jesus was once telling a story. He was telling parables, and he described the kingdom of heaven in this way. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field. When a man found it, he went away and sold all that he had, took that money and bought the field. Again, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he finds one of great value, in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that pearl. Treasure. Pearls. Rosaria Butterfield was a professor of English and Women's Studies at Syracuse University, a university not too far from my hometown of Toronto in Canada. It's on the other side of the border. She says that she was fervent for the worldviews of Marx, of Hegel, of Freud, and of Darwin. She described herself as a leftist lesbian professor who despised Christians. One day in 1997, she wrote an article for the local newspaper. And in that article, she was critical of this Christian men's movement called Promise Keepers. And she also criticized Jesus and the Republican Party and patriarchy, basically everything that was bad in this world. And as a result of writing this article, she got a lot of letters. All of them were either fan mail or hate mail. So she had two boxes next to her desk. One of it was for fan mail, and one of it was for hate mail. She would put all the letters into either of these two boxes. But one day she got a letter that didn't fit into either of these two boxes. It was by Pastor Ken Smith, the pastor of the Syracuse Reformed Presbyterian Church. And he clearly didn't agree with her. But he wasn't angry with her. Instead, he asked her questions. He said, how did you arrive at this conclusion? Why do you think the way you think? And he invited her to start dialoguing with him. Well, she didn't know what to do with this letter, so she just put it into the recycling bin. But she thought about it for the rest of that day, and at the end of the day, she went back to the recycling bin, scooped it out, and accepted Pastor Ken Smith's invitation. She must have had some apprehension, though, in going, because she had interacted with Christians before. You see, she had been on gay pride parades. While on those parades, she saw the Christians standing by the side of the parade, holding up their signs and expressing their contempt. She says it was as clear as crystal blue sky that they wanted her and everyone she loved to burn in hell for all of eternity. And now she was going to their home for dinner. But when she got to Pastor Ken's house, she found he wasn't like that. He was a nice guy. They could get along. Him and his wife, Floy, welcomed them into their homes. And Pastor Ken would have discussions with her about politics. They would have book exchanges. And he would pray right there in front of her. Pray sincere prayers where he'd even repent of his sins. Well, around that same time, she decided to start studying and researching the religious right in the United States. She figured if she was going to understand these people, she needed to know their holy book. So she started studying the Bible just as an academic research exercise. But she says as she was reading this book, the words started getting underneath her skin. And one day she was talking to a transgender friend, and she looked at this friend and said, "But what if it's all really true?" One Sunday morning, she woke up in bed. Her lesbian lover was lying next to her. She got out of bed and she went to Pastor Ken's church. She sat down there in that pew. She says she knew that she was different from everybody else there. They knew she was different, and she knew that they knew that she knew. But they still welcomed her there. They loved her, and she kept going back Sunday after Sunday. The Holy Spirit started to work in her life. She started to think about what it would cost her to become a Christian. But as she calculated the cost, she did not like what she saw on the other side of that equation. She knew what she would lose if she ever decided to follow Jesus. But despite that, she writes the following. She says, "Then one ordinary day I came to Jesus, open-handed and naked. In this war of worldviews, Ken was there. Floy was there. The church that had been praying for me for years was there. Jesus triumphed. And I was a broken mess. Conversion was a train wreck. I did not want to lose everything that I loved. But the voice of God sang a sanguine love song in the rubble of my world. I weakly believed that if Jesus could conquer death, he could make right my world. I drank tentatively at first, then passionately of the solace of the Holy Spirit. I rested in private peace, then community, and today in the shelter of a covenant family." Why did Rosaria do that? Why was she willing to leave everything that she loved behind? It's because she found that treasure buried in a field. She found the pearl of great price. She found the only reason why anything at all matters, and she was willing to leave everything for it. She found the fountain of all joy, the king of all nations, the lover of her soul. She found the only true purpose that she was created for, a purpose that would last for all of eternity. She found the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and she knew the only thing that mattered was to know him and to make him known. Jesus once had a man who came to him and asked him a question. He said, "Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar?" I wish Jesus said no. That way, every tax year in Canada, we have to fill out these forms. It's a headache. And you have to give money away, and it's awful. And I could just say, no, I'm not doing this because that's what Jesus said. Don't pay taxes to Caesar. But that's not what Jesus said. He said, "Show me a coin." And then he asked, "Whose image is on this coin?" Everybody said, "Caesar." So Jesus said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's." After Jesus said that, the man walked away. he should have asked Jesus another question. He should have said, what belongs to God? And then Jesus could look at him and say, whose image is on you? See, the Word of God says you are made in the image of God. And that is why you have objective value and worth. That's why it matters whether you live or whether you die. You are made in the image of God. And that gives you objective, inherent value and worth. You know, so many people in Korea, in Canada too, they decide whether you are valuable, whether you should be loved, whether you're important, by a whole bunch of different factors. Did you graduate from Seoul? Did you graduate from Yongsan, Harvard, Oxford? How much money do you have? Are you good looking? Did you accomplish anything in sports? Were you popular in school? They use all of these factors to decide whether you're important, whether you're valuable. Let me tell you something. All of that is just in their imaginations. It matters as much as whether you put the milk and cookies out for Santa Claus. It's just something they've created in their minds. The reason you have value and worth is not because of anything that you've accomplished in your life. It's not how much money you have. It's not how you look. It's because you are made in the image of God. And it's because God is real. And he has created you for the great purpose of worshiping him and glorifying him. It's because of that that your life really matters. Everything else is just in your imagination. Everything else is unimportant unless it connects back to you and your relationship with God. That is the truth, my friends. And you see, it's not enough just to have a purpose to your life. You could have a purpose, but life could still be meaningless. Imagine if all of us were created through the process of evolution. It started out just a few or hundreds of millions of years ago through a little bacteria. Imagine that bacteria was created by space aliens. The reason they did it is so that one day they could come back here and eat you all as a light snack. You would then have a purpose to your existence, but it wouldn't be very meaningful. Life has meaning because you are made in the image of God and you are created for the purpose of worshiping him. At the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, when King Solomon has done everything there is to do, he comes to this final decision. He says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, whether it is good or evil. There's a song called Some Nights by a band named Fun. And there's a few lines in that song that go like this. They say, but I still wake up. I still see your ghost. Oh, Lord, I don't know what I stand for. What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights, I don't know. Let me ask you something. What is your life about? What do you stand for? Is there anything you're willing to die for? Are you living for the purpose that you were created, or are you just filling up the time until you die? You have one life to live. Don't waste your life. Make it count. Thank you.